book 2. I'm here actually to wrap up books instead of just stating books that I want to read. Yeah, I actually do read the books that I set out on my, well, not always the books on the TBR, but I do actually read. I don't just like make lists of things to read. Yeah. Anyway, so this video is going to be about all the nonfiction that I read since I last updated, I believe. That's 9 books there. So, first is A Grief Observed by C.S. Lewis. This was a collection of journals where he was going through the grieving process after his wife died and his reflections on his faith in regards to that. And he raised a lot of good questions and, you know, delved into a lot of different theological things through this grieving process. And it's interesting because the book wasn't edited. It was published, I believe, posthumously, but it wasn't edited to make him look good. Because there were some times where he's like going to some really dark stuff, and then, you know, you could see the whole process and him getting out of that. It was like, it was really good. I really appreciated that. I do have some quotes from some of the books, some of the other books I don't, but I wanted to share this quote. "Sooner or later I must face the question in plain language. What reason have we, except our own desperate wishes, to believe that God is, by any standard we can conceive, good? Doesn't all the prima facie evidence suggest exactly the opposite? What have we to set against it? We set Christ against it, but how, if he were mistaken? Almost his last words may have a perfectly clear meaning. He had found that the being he called Father was horribly and infinitely different from what he had supposed. The trap so long and carefully prepared and so subtly baited was at last sprung on the cross." I thought that was really powerful. Then I also read American Fascists by Hedges, and this is about the rise of the Christian right. I think that was the subtitle. And yeah, this book is from like the 2000s. The book I was looking at before that was from the 90s. So like this whole Christian fascism, Christian nationalism thing is not a new thing. It's been going on for a while. People have been aware of it. People have been trying to address it, and now it's kind of got a little out of hand, hasn't it? The whole time I was reading this book, I was thinking, like, I wonder how he would rewrite certain sections after the Trump presidency, right? Like, what would he be writing in 2020 about all this stuff, or 2022, even just now, stuff that's going on still. Yeah, it was a fascinating look. He went from everywhere from, like, on a personal level, the problems with Christian fundamentalism and right-wing politics kind of like coming together. So like right from on the personal level to like the huge political level. So he went to one class, and he actually like did the footwork. This wasn't all just like research. Like this was him going to places and like doing stuff and talking to people. He went to this one course on how to witness to people, and witnessing in Christianity is like trying to convert people, basically. It's a little more complicated than that for some people, but the goal of it is to convert people. And like taking that and showing how those little things that seem so little on the small scale actually have this larger effect on politics, and not just America. We see it starting to happen here in Canada too, right? It's just, yeah. It's a scary book. I highly suggest you read it. I also at the same time was watching The Family on Netflix, so that kind of like tied in more of like the political Christianity part to it as well. Yeah. And I want to stress, like, I myself identify as Christian. I identify as a progressive Christian, so it's you know, I'm talking about fundamentalists here. And I want to read this quote because I think it kind of exemplifies a lot. You know, he talked about so much. He talked about like the toxic masculinity. He talked about why people who are, you know, below the poverty line keep voting against their interests, and all this stuff. So I'll just read this quote. "Friends, neighbors, colleagues, and family members who do not conform to the ideology are gradually dehumanized. They are tainted with the despised characteristics inherent in the godless. In this new binary world, segments of the human race are disqualified for moral and ethical consideration. And because fundamentalist followers live in a binary universe, they are incapable of seeing others as anything more than inverted reflections of themselves. If they seek to destroy non-believers to create a Christian America, then non-believers must be seeking to destroy them. This belief system negates the possibility of an ethical life. When people come to believe that they are immune from evil, that there is no resemblance between themselves and those they define as the enemy, they will inevitably grow to embody the evil they claim to fight. It is only by grasping our own capacity for evil, our own darkness, that we hold our own capacity for evil at bay. When evil is always external, then moral purification always entails the eradication of others. Like, that just kind of accompanied the whole ideology, almost. Yeah. Another nonfiction I read is 22 Murders by Paul Palango. This is about a mass murder that happened in Canada, April 2020, the beginning of everything, right? And so what happened was this man went and he started in his little village in Nova Scotia, and he murdered, I think it was 10 or 12 people that day, and then disguised himself as an RCMP officer, driving in a fake car and everything, and going around and just driving around Nova Scotia and just shooting people. And the book is mostly about the RCMP's utter failure to do anything, starting with the big question that came out when this first started happening is, why didn't they send out an Amber Alert, an emergency alert, which, would send notifications to people in Nova Scotia where this was happening, say, hey, stay home, because there's a murder rampaging about, killing people. He started off murdering people he knew and then just started murdering people he didn't know. And the utter failure of the RCMP to do that. And then his village only had like 2 roads in and out. So like, why weren't there road closures? Why weren't we informed when they knew that he was in an RCMP vehicle? Why weren't people informed? Because RCMP officers were killed too. It's just like this whole thing, and he goes, I would never want to get on Paul Palango's bad side because he goes like deep into it. He had one source and he looked at her because she was contradicting things that he was saying, and it turned out like she's a cousin of an RCMP officer, and he's just like, listen, like, don't come at me, I'm gonna find this information out. And I was like, dude, this guy's scary. Like, I would not want to get on his bad side because he will find out like what your angle is. Yeah, it was really, I can't say the word enjoyable because I'm reading about like a real life massacre that happened, right? Like, but the way he wrote was very compelling. Like, we're talking like this is like a 600-page book. It's huge, it's massive, and I like blew through it. It was so readable. Yeah. Okay. Then I also read Curry by Naben Ruthnum, and I can't remember the subtitle of this one. It's about race, eating, and literature, I think it was about. And so it's a Canadian author, Indian Canadian author, and he's just talking about racism faced by brown people today, which is very rampant. We talk, a lot about racism, and in Canada, like, you'll see people say, I'm not racist, but when they want to talk about, like, people from Southeast Asia, like, oh boy, like, they don't even hide it sometimes. It's ridiculous. So he's talking about that, and also talking about, the duty, or the not duty of, like, second generation, Indian, Canadians or Indian Americans, even like immigrants, and how they write and what they're portraying about Indian people. So he has this thing called Curry books, which he says they all follow the same tropes, and they all kind of, no matter whether you're from Sri Lanka or North India or Bangladesh, Pakistan, he's like, they all kind of come and make this similar story, but he's like, but we're not all similar. Like, the food that he has in, I don't know if I could pronounce it properly, Mauritius or Mauritius, I should have looked that up before, I apologize, is totally different from like food in Punjab. right? So it's really interesting. As someone who loves like Indian culture and Indian food, you know, I feel like I have to learn so much more because like the the culture and the food is so different depending on where you're from, where you go. So I want to share one quote from there. Inviting a shared past to create a unified diasporic culture is in part the project of Curry books, of narratives such as Bend It Like Beckham, which are built on easily recognizable touchstone tropes. But the past can be altered to fit a desire for belonging and solidarity in the present. What people in the South Asian diaspora and the West share is that people looking at us assume that we all come from a similar past and place. But we don't, and there's no need to pretend that we do. So I thought that was really interesting. And then I read Night by Elie Weisel. This is like a classic of Holocaust literature. Yeah, it was... I feel like I can't say anything bad about it, but at the same time, like, it should still be able to be criticized. I had some issues with what he was saying, especially, like, this one man, this scene just sticks out. He says, this one man, if he hadn't lost his faith in God, he would still be alive. And I was just like, you were in the middle of the Holocaust, and this is what you're thinking? You think all those people died because they lost faith in God? It's like, holy cow, man. That just put a bad taste in my mouth. Considering at points that he too was, you know, questioning his faith. And it's just like, yeah, that's all I'm going to say about that. The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry. That was a really good book. Grayson Perry is cross-dresser. But he identifies as a straight man. And that was really good. It was all about toxic masculinity. And the way he has of looking at things is just, it's really good. Like, you know, he comes at it like sideways, but when he explains it, it makes total sense. I'm like, dude, you're putting into words like these thoughts and stuff that I've had for a while. And it was really interesting to hear him, not to hear him because I was reading words, but to read what he was saying. And it was another such a readable book. That was during my trying to read a book a day, and I did finish that in a day, even though it was on the chunkier side. Yeah, his experiences talking with people, his ideas that he presented and then like backed up in the arguments that he made, were really good. And I could just read, I wrote like 4 pages of notes from that book. But I'm just going to use one quote here. We have been governed for too long by a group who confuses their white middle-class male view of the world with unbiased clarity. That whole idea that, another quote here is, objectivity is male subjectivity. Is that, you know, we have to look at other people's point of view, and just because it doesn't jive with what we think is objective doesn't mean it's not true, because what we think of as objective has been colored so long by, you know, the people at the top. Yeah, and he explains a lot about how, like, say the Industrial Revolution had on making, dividing the genders into, like, men out in the world working and women in the home cooking, whereas before it was men and women together working in the house. I thought that was an interesting idea too. Yeah, I highly suggest, if you're interested in gender politics at all, to pick that up. Number 7 is The Fire Next Time by James Baldwin, and just, I wanted to write quotes from it, but I would have just written up the whole book, to be honest. That was just amazing. Again, like, looking at things sideways, you know, not just taking things as they are, but like examining things and taking a closer look at it, was just amazing. And I learned more, I've learned a little bit about the Nation of Islam, but the way like he talked about it in the book too was quite interesting. The way he talked about, you know, faith as well, because he has a very interesting background in regards to that, was interesting as well. I wish I could say more about it, but it's just, I feel like you just have to read it. Like, it's so short. I think it was like 60 pages on my e-reader. Like, just read it. at this point. Okay, It's All Absolutely Fine by Ruby Elliot. I read that as well. It's like a comic slash written. There's some written parts in there as well. Mostly about her experience with mental health. She has bipolar disorder. And yeah, it was really good. It was really interesting. There was this one idea that really stuck out to me of like everyone's walking on the surface and she's underground and she's like digging up. I have a quote here. Let me just find it. Oh, it's right. I still went to the page. Of her digging up trying to get to other people's level. And she's like, so why can't I just do what everyone else is doing? If they're all starting here, having mental illness is like being buried deep underground. I have to tunnel upward in the dark just to reach everyone's normal baseline of functionality. And I thought that just like explained a lot, because people were like, well, why can't you do this? I do this every day. I'm like, well, okay, yeah, but you do it. Doesn't mean other people can do it. You are not the baseline for everyone. It's just, yeah, so frustrating. Yeah, it was really good to read that and, you know, see a lot of shared experiences and stuff like that. The last one I'm going to talk about is Under the Banner of Heaven by Jon Krakauer. And I have to say, like, I've now picked up the 2 other books by Jon Krakauer, Into the Wild and Into Thin Air. I think they're both called Into something. Because, like, his passion for the topic of Mormonism, like, was astounding. And, like, even, like, the footnotes that they were, like, totally irrelevant to everything, but they were just like, he's like, I just have to share this information. And I was just like, that is so fascinating. I love it. Love just seeing the passion of someone coming through the page like that. So Under the Banner of Heaven is about some murders that took place where this family of Mormons, it was 2 brothers, but the whole family was kind of involved, ended up murdering their sister-in-law and their niece. And they were going to go murder more people because they thought God told them to. And then he was explaining how the Mormon church and the Mormon belief and Mormon history led to them being able to believe this stuff. And it was just astounding. So you're not only getting the crime, you're getting like every background piece that he could find on this. And there was a TV show as well with Andrew Garfield. It doesn't go as in-depth to Mormonism as the book does, so I suggest like do both, read both and watch it. It was worth it to watch it, but yeah, definitely worth the read. And it's interesting now because I'm semi-following the I can't remember their names now. It's like Day something. Anyways, it was the mother and her new husband, and they murdered her children and her husband, and he murdered his wife. And they come from the Mormon tradition as well. So it's fascinating seeing how their beliefs influenced this murder and how this previous murder plays into it as well. Yeah, it's just absolutely fascinating to me. I'm really diving into true crime apparently with 22 murders, and Under the Banner of Heaven definitely like making my top books of the year list. So yeah, that's it. Let me know if you've read any fun nonfiction lately, and thank you for watching.